For thousands of years, nobody lived on these islands. Then, in the 15th century, ships arrived and built an entire nation from nothing. Rising from volcanic peaks in the middle of the Atlantic, Cape Verde is one of the few places on Earth with no indigenous population. And despite being surrounded by endless ocean, its people spent centuries dying of thirst. How could this seemingly impossible place exist? A geometric shadow stretches for miles across a basin of crushed charcoal. The lines of this structure are so precise that they resemble the work of a deliberately chosen architect. Rising 9,281 feet into a cloudless sky, this obsidian pyramid remains a geological anomaly. The surface consists of fine basaltic ash that acts as a heat sink, reaching 120 degrees Fahrenheit under the midday sun. This is the mouth of the volcano. Looking down from the jagged rim, the floor of the crater appears like a lunar wasteland, yet it contains signs of biological persistence. 700 people occupy this circular trap, living in houses constructed from the same liquid rock that destroyed their schools in 2014. Most administrative logic would classify this as an unlivable exclusion zone, but the population returned before the ground had cooled. They live in the Chardas calderas. The reason for this dangerous proximity lies in the physics of the soil. The porous black grit behaves like a thermal sponge, trapping the rare Atlantic mist and holding it deep beneath the surface. Stunted green vines crawl across the soot, their roots reaching into minerals forged in extreme heat. The resulting grapes produce a wine with a metallic, smoky profile, physical evidence of a crop that survived an attempt at incineration. The community refers to this liquid as volcanic blood. They exist on a cycle of demolition and replanting, treating the mountain as a landlord that occasionally demands the destruction of a village as rent for the most fertile soil in the Atlantic. Gravity behaves differently inside this circular stone rim. Entering the pinkish fluid feels less like swimming and more like reclining on a solid surface. The liquid does not splash. It pushes back with a density that keeps the human body floating high above the floor. This basin occupies the center of an extinct volcano on Sal Island, sitting nearly 30 feet below the level of the Atlantic. The surrounding walls rise 100 feet, trapping the heat and silencing the wind. Seawater seeps through porous volcanic rock, entering the crater floor and finding no path out. The sun cooks the liquid until the mineral concentration reaches 20 times that of the open sea. Large crystals coat the banks, a white crust that once functioned as a global currency known as white gold. Rusted skeletal towers of an old cable car system still shadow the brine. These structures provided a physical link between the crater floor and the waiting ships during the 1800s. Former laborers describe a lifestyle dictated by the weight of the harvest. Carrying sacks reaching 60 pounds, they navigated the sharp, glass-like terrain while the brine found every micro tear in their skin. The work followed the rhythm of a heavy industrial loom. Today, the mechanical noise has vanished, leaving a landscape where the only sound is the dry crackle of salt breaking under a boot. Fine orange silt coats the lens within seconds. This grit is a traveler, a foreign material that crossed 350 miles of ocean to bury a volcanic ridge. The wind carries a dry, abrasive whistle. This sound is the Sahara eating the Atlantic. This slow-motion invasion has created a shifting mass of dunes known as the Deserto de Viana. The sand behaves with relentless industrial efficiency. It moves 3 feet every year, smothering palms and erasing the boundaries of old farms. While the population on Boa Vista builds stone barriers to fight the encroaching dryness, the geography demonstrates a total indifference to human architecture. Near the edge of these moving hills, a different force operates on a global scale. A loggerhead sea turtle, weighing 300 pounds, drags its heavy, wet armor across the cooling sand. This creature navigated thousands of miles of deep currents using a biological compass embedded in its brain. It reads the magnetic signature of the seabed to find the exact inch of coastline where its life began 30 years ago. While the crumbling stone walls of abandoned villages stand as records of human retreat due to thirst, the loggerheads maintain a cycle of return that has lasted for millions of years. They ignore the skeletal remains of the salt trade, finding sanctuary in a space that humanity could no longer hold. Basalt walls stand 4,000 feet tall and trap the moving Atlantic clouds, forcing a constant mist to settle over a valley that looks like a vertical emerald forest. The paths behave like a stone nervous system. These narrow tracks cling to the ridges, snaking through coffee groves and vertical gardens. Every mile of road consists of thousands of hand-shaped rocks laid over centuries to connect the high ridges to the ocean shore. Walking requires a rhythmic calculation of balance. A single misstep would result in a drop of 300 feet into the jagged folds of the volcano. These paths were built by the same muscles that currently carry the weight of the harvest. A woman balances a heavy plastic jug of water on her skull with the same grace as a dancer, her neck muscles having hardened into a supportive pillar over 6 decades of labor. They do not measure distance in miles, but in the number of stone steps climbed between the morning and the sunset. Small houses sit perched on ledges no wider than a driveway. These dwellings feature thick stone walls and lime wash in shades of ochre and sky blue. They appear to grow out of the dark basalt rather than sitting upon it. The sound of the valley is a conversation between the rushing streams and the distant shouts of neighbors calling to each other from opposite cliffs. Because the walls are so steep, a message can travel across the air in seconds, while the physical journey to meet would take 2 hours of walking. They have built an existence on these narrow terraces where every square inch of dirt is used to grow food. This vertical garden survives because the people have learned to carry the weight of their world on the strength of their own spines. Walking to the jagged rim of a basalt wall, the mist suddenly parts to reveal a massive circular floor carpeted in shades of lime and emerald. This is a mountain peak that collapsed into its own heart, creating a bowl of silent, fertile dirt known as the Cova de Paul on the island of Santo Antão. The caldera measures nearly a mile across, a geological trap where the sound of the wind is replaced by an eerie, muffled stillness. The surrounding stone walls rise 1,000 feet high, blocking the violent Atlantic gales. On the floor of this extinct furnace, the local population has built a world based on the physics of the fog. Because the sky refuses to provide rain for months, farmers rely on a biological harvest of the air. Every cornstalk and bean vine functions as a moisture collector. The trade winds funnel clouds over the rim, forcing the vapor into the basin. When the mist strikes a leaf or a stone wall, tiny droplets merge and gain enough mass to fall into the volcanic soil. This is not traditional irrigation. It is a slow, relentless accumulation of the Atlantic breath. The architecture of the crater ensures that every square inch of the basin remains cool and damp, while the peaks above remain scorched. Small stone houses sit huddled against the interior cliffs, their roofs darkened by the constant dampness. Residents move through the fields in a permanent twilight, gathering potatoes and coffee grown in a space that used to be a vent for liquid rock. A pebble kicked off the edge takes several seconds to reach the white foam of the Atlantic churning below. Gravity feels like a heavy hand pressing against the chest on this narrow cobblestone ridge. A cluster of peppermint green and rose pink houses sits pinned to a jagged volcanic rib. The settlement clings to a cliff face so steep it seems to ignore the basic laws of structural engineering. Constructing these walls required a level of persistence that matches the hardness of the basalt. Every bag of cement and every heavy stone block traveled miles on human shoulders, along paths barely wide enough for a single person. No cranes or heavy machinery could reach this specific crevice. The community built upward by anchoring foundations directly into ancient lava veins that remained motionless for 1,000,000 years. The scale of the vertical drop creates a constant hum as the ocean wind squeezes through deep mountain folds. While the surrounding mountain peaks are a cool, ash-colored hue, the architecture stands out with its bright lime green and deep blue. The colors serve a practical purpose, marking a human footprint in a landscape that usually rejects it. Children kick soccer balls on patios 3 feet from a 1,000-foot fall, protected by a low stone wall and a lifetime of spatial awareness. International publications recognize this view as one of the most beautiful on the coast, but for the residents, the scenery is secondary to the stability of the rock. A heavy dampness settles in the lungs, making every breath feel thick and cold. The temperature drops 20 degrees during a short climb, leaving the scorched rock of the coastline behind. Magenta petals from hibiscus plants pile up on the stones, forming a wet mulch that smells of damp soil and perfume. This plateau stays hidden within a permanent cloud. Jagged basalt ridges act as a biological net, snagging trade winds and forcing vapor to drench the ground without a single drop of rain. Stone houses feature red clay roofs buried under vegetation that grows faster than the residents can prune it. The architecture follows a logic of enclosure, using thick walls to hold the moisture inside the courtyards. The faces of the population reveal a hidden maritime history. During the 1800s, whaling vessels from Massachusetts used these coordinates as a recruitment center. This industry created a genetic intersection in the middle of the ocean. Many women in the community possess striking light green or grey eyes set against deep West African skin tones. These features provide a biological map of sailors from New England who left their mark on this isolated peak. Life moves at a pace dictated by the fog. The community exists inside a silent white shroud, where the only constant sound is moisture dripping from leaves. Vertical slabs of dark volcanic rock support a city balancing on a knife edge. A boot heel clicks against polished cobblestones that lead directly to a drop of 100 feet. Below, the water is a violent white foam against a beach the color of crushed charcoal. This specific plateau followed a map of social control during the 1800s. The architecture uses a vertical logic. Large villas, known as sobrados, feature tall windows and wooden balconies to catch the salt breeze. These upper levels belonged to landowners, while the ground floors remained windowless stone boxes for laborers. The height of a bed determined a person's biological and social value. The stillness of the volcanic rock breaks every April. The atmosphere vibrates with the rhythm of the pylon. Women gather in circles, using heavy wooden pestles to pound corn into flour. The rhythmic thud of wood against stone mimics a mechanical heartbeat. This physical labor provides the energy for the Festival of the Flag. Horses gallop through the narrow alleys at full speed. Their hooves kick up a fine grey silt that coats the pastel walls as the sun reaches 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Men compete in races to prove their status, seeking to capture a silk emblem that grants the right to host the community for the following year. Wooden hulls, weighing 1,000 pounds, grind against a white sand shore, their vibrant yellow and red paint blistered by a sun that reaches 95 degrees Fahrenheit. The air carries the sharp tang of salt and raw tuna. Every morning at 10 o'clock, the Atlantic provides a physical harvest. Groups of men use the collective force of their shoulders to drag boats up a wooden pier that stretches 300 feet into the turquoise water. This ritual defines the village of Santa Maria on Sal Island. Families gather with plastic buckets, waiting for silver scales to appear from the holds. The exchange follows a logic of kindness known as morabeza. A fisherman might drop a 5-pound tuna into the hands of a neighbor without a financial transaction. This is a daily theater of survival where the community ensures no one faces the hunger of the desert alone. 2 miles along the coast, a predator moves within 6 inches of a human ankle. The water is barely knee-deep, sitting atop a jagged volcanic reef. These are juvenile lemon sharks. Instead of a hunting ground, this specific lagoon serves as a biological nursery. The high salt concentration and the shallow depth create a protective barrier. Large ocean hunters cannot navigate these few inches of water, leaving the young sharks in a safe zone. The sharks use the territory to grow until they gain enough mass to survive the deep blue, while the population watches the development of a species that existed long before the first volcanic rock emerged. The silence of the lagoon records this coexistence between the skin of a visitor and the sandpaper scales of a hunter. As you venture deeper into the city, the flaking earthy yellow and turquoise paint on the thick stone walls resembles dried pieces of leather. This material loss occurs because the salt air eats the lime wash at a rate of several inches every century. The urban grid occupies a floor of jagged basalt and sun-bleached coral. Within these structures, the midday heat reaches 95 degrees Fahrenheit, forcing human activity into narrow strips of shade. These homes follow a logic of survival against the Saharan dust that settles into every crack of the masonry. The population navigates these cobblestones with a calm, rhythmic gait. A specific phrase, "no stress," appears on every sign and every item from clothing to bags. It serves as a necessary physiological defense mechanism. In a landscape with virtually no fresh water, a rapid heart rate is a resource no one can afford. The atmosphere carries the smell of charcoal embers and salted fat. Heavy iron pots simmer for 12 hours to process dried corn and beans into a dense fuel dot. This cachupa dish, weighing nearly 2 pounds per serving, provides the calories for a hard-working life. Every bowl contains the smoky profile of the volcanic soil used to grow the grain. Beside these pots, leathery barnacles, harvested from jagged cliffs, provide a raw dose of salt. Extracting the meat requires the manual dexterity to twist open a shell that looks like a prehistoric claw. Police once searched volcanic ridges for simple iron bars and portable bellows. Owning a notched rod and an accordion was enough to put a citizen in a prison cell for months. The ruling power viewed these objects as tools for revolution, fearing a tempo that moved faster than a government could track. This sound came from calloused palms that spent daylight fighting a sun reaching 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The noise starts when a musician scrapes a dull knife against a scrap of metal salvaged from a construction site. At 140 beats per minute, the rattle mimics the firing of an automatic weapon. When the accordion joins, the melody feels like a high-speed chase through a maze. While the coast attracts fame for slow, weeping songs, the rugged interior pulses with a different energy. It goes by the name Funana. For farmers who spend 12 hours swinging pickaxes into jagged basalt, nighttime dancing acts as a biological reset. The movement requires heavy boot stomping and a frantic shaking of the chest to vibrate fatigue out of the bones. It functions as a physical therapy session for survival. This extreme speed ensures that the heavy weight of the past never has a chance to land on shoulders. Once sat silent between jagged cliffs and the Atlantic waves. In 1462, this stillness ended when wooden ships arrived to build a global hub on a rock pile with no indigenous population. The settlers laid dark basalt stones for a cathedral and raised thick walls, establishing the first permanent European city ever constructed in the tropics. Ships moving toward the Americas or Asia relied on these specific coordinates to survive. The harbor became one of the Atlantic's most important replenishment ports. Mariners restocked fresh water and food before crossing thousands of miles of deep ocean. However, the primary cargo passing through these narrow stone streets was not spices or gold. It was human life. The geographical position of Santiago Island turned this valley into a primary processing center for the transatlantic slave trade. Barracks lined the alleys, holding thousands of West Africans taken from their homelands. Amidst the heat of 90 degrees Fahrenheit, mothers faced the immediate threat of cultural erasure. Since speaking their native languages was often forbidden, they used sound to protect their history. In the total darkness of stone huts, they hummed the songs of their ancestors. The ruins of a 15th century church still overlook the bay, offering no shade to the modern traveler. The stone pillar in the center of the square remains as a physical measurement of the price paid to build the Atlantic world. Originally known as Ribera Grande and now called Cidade Velha, the town marks the precise point where African cultures and European power structures collided to create a Creole society that did not exist before the first ships arrived. A boot makes a dry, crunching sound against parched dirt that hasn't tasted rain in months. Just a few thousand feet away, the Atlantic crashes in violent shades of blue But within these thick concrete walls, the air remains heavy and motionless. A rusted iron gate groans, a metallic shriek that has occupied this valley since 1936. The architecture followed a brutal logic. Use the sun as a weapon. The low buildings look like simple storage sheds, but the geology of the plateau turns the structures into biological ovens. When the temperature reaches 100 degrees Fahrenheit, the concrete absorbs the energy and radiates it inward. One specific cell, a windowless box with a heavy metal door, carries the name the frying pan. Inside, the air once climbed so high that breathing felt like inhaling liquid lead. This facility was built to break the will of those who demanded independence from colonial rule. While the guards monitored the exhaustion of the inmates, a quiet network of resilience thrived in the shadows. Men turned their isolation into a university, whispered lessons through stone walls, and planned the birth of a nation while their bodies withered. Today, the salt-heavy wind continues to eat the barbed wire, turning iron into orange dust. The surviving locks and chains provide a physical measurement of the fear held by an empire. The ground vibrates as 30,000 tons of steel glide into a sunken volcanic crater. The water remains dark and still, a natural basin that plunges 100 feet to the rocky floor. During the 1800s, the atmosphere smelled of wet coal and sea salt. Vessels from London, Boston, and Lisbon relied on these specific coordinates to survive. This basin, Porto Grande, functioned as one of the most important coaling stations in the Atlantic. The massive iron hulls of ships, some stretching over 600 feet, dwarf the small concrete houses built into the hillsides. On the docks of São Vicente, the clatter of cranes and the mix of global languages created a culture that looks toward the horizon rather than the mountains. The arrival of sailors from 3 continents forged a population with a cosmopolitan perspective, a meeting point of peoples, languages, and traditions. Beside the churning propellers, a flash of silver breaks the surface. Flying fish extend their oversized fins like transparent sails, gliding for 300 feet to escape predators in the deep. Their movement follows a strict biological logic. Leave a heavy, dangerous environment to find temporary freedom in the air. The spirit on the island follows a similar trajectory. The population use music and will to lift themselves out of the heavy gravity of the past, gliding over the weight of history just as the fish glide over the Atlantic swells. A heavy wind hits the chest like a solid object, carrying a fine grit that traveled 300 miles from the Sahara. The sound is a constant, high-pitched whistle as Atlantic air squeezes through jagged basalt ridges. On this terrain, the silence of humanity is absolute. No engines, no voices, only the rhythmic thud of waves against cliffs. Scattered stone foundations poke through the scrub like broken teeth. During the 1800s, groups arrived with tools and seeds, attempting to force this volcanic rock into a home. They built thick walls to block the gales, but they could not overcome a fatal geological flaw. The island behaves like a sieve. Rainfall vanishes instantly into porous volcanic soil, sinking too deep for a well or a route to reach. By the 1960s, the final residents abandoned their homes, retreating across the channel and admitting defeat to a landscape that refuses to store fresh water. Now the territory belongs to those who specialize in the extreme. A lizard, the Cape Verde skink, slides over a hot basalt slab that reaches 110 degrees Fahrenheit. These reptiles operate on a moisture-free budget, extracting hydration from the eggs of seabirds or the rare mist trapped on their scales. The stone ruins provide a physical record of a failed experiment. The island stands as a biological fortress, a place where humanity was a temporary disturbance in a timeline belonging entirely to scales and feathers. Yellow grit occupies the space where a family table once stood, rising 3 feet high inside a living room. This material did not originate on this island. It traveled 300 miles from the African mainland, carried by an Atlantic wind that never stops. These walls, built from thick basalt and coral, are currently being processed by the desert. During the 1800s, the atmosphere vibrated with the sound of metal shovels hitting salt crusts. The specific geology of the shoreline allowed the ocean to wash into low basins, leaving behind white crystals that functioned as a global currency. This wealth supported a thriving population on Boa Vista. However, the environment held a hidden debt. While the sea provided salt, the sky refused to provide fresh water. A drought lasting 20 years turned the local soil into a fine powder. By 1960, the biological cost of staying became higher than the price of the salt. The community packed wooden crates and walked toward the water, leaving their architecture to the dunes. A rusted hinge makes a high-pitched metallic shriek, the only conversation left in these alleys. The dunes move 3 feet every year, a slow-motion invasion that smothers the physical record of the salt trade. This ghost village serves as a physical map of a forced departure, where a thirsty population simply ran out of time against a moving Saharan tide. Ten volcanic summits push against 3,000 miles of deep water. While the Sahara continues to send dust to bury the valleys, the population maintains an existence based on adaptation. Identity remains a cultural byproduct of the last 5 centuries. This name persists as a geographic error. It functions as a human experiment inside a saltwater void. Fresh water is scarce, leaving the collective will of the population as the primary resource that ensures survival on these jagged volcanic rocks.